Let me start. Thank you, Anne, very much for joining us at our conference. We are delighted to have you here. The first question that I would like to pose is about macroeconomic prospect, and how serious is this pandemic crisis compared to previous ones?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm pleased to be here and talking with you, but it would be nicer if we were in person. It's very hard to say how serious this is because it's so different from whatever's gone before. In other depressions or recessions, what has happened is economic activity started decreasing, and then it accumulated and kept on decreasing. Here we had a very sudden and sharp stop. We had to stop because of the pandemic. Lots of people in lots of places lost their jobs very, very fast. Here in the United States, the numbers are unbelievable. But the question is, as we open up, will people believe that things are going to get better? Or are they going to stay cautious? And will the opening up come too soon, in which case more people will get sick and we'll have a second wave? Unfortunately, in the United States right now, it looks like we're getting a lot of people sick because there was too much opening up too soon. And that's a problem because then everybody's going to be more scared the next time, and the opening up will be even less effective. I thought that if we kept the opening up for later, then when it happened, everybody would be confident enough and employment could pick up quite quickly. But as it is, it looks as if people that opened up, even factories are closing again because of people having the coronavirus. So it's very difficult to forecast how it will be.
How about policy responses by major countries? Of course, they have been pursuing aggressive fiscal and monetary expansion policy. By and large, would you be happy with the way the country has responded to the crisis so far?
Well, I think the crisis had to have two parts to the response, one of which was to attack the virus and get it under control, because that's a fundamental issue. And unless that's done, nothing else is going to work for very long. So in effect, I would rate everybody, I think, on three things. One, how do they respond to the virus first off? Second, to what extent have they been able to manage that? And third would be the macro policy that goes with it. And in the United States, at least, most of us think that the epidemiologists were right, that we should have stayed in phase one, i.e. the lockdown, for a longer time. We let up too soon and we're likely to be in trouble. And there are other problems too with the way we've responded to the coronavirus, which makes everything else worse. So in effect, I would give the United States very poor grades in terms of initial response. Some other countries did very well, and as you know, South Korea is one of the ones that looks as if it's done very, very well in all this, and has managed to get the contact tracing and those kinds of things going, which are hardly started in the U.S. at all. So there's very little of that, and that's a big problem. So there's all of that. A big question, of course, is how soon will we ever get a vaccine, because that will make a huge difference to everything once we do. Other countries are very different. Norway and Denmark seem to have done very well. Sweden very badly. Italy did very badly at first, but then corrected and seems to be now doing much better. The Germans seem to have done very well. And as you know, New Zealand has done very well. So some have handled the virus very well. On the macro side, I think, again, it differs by country. But on the whole, I think the macro response has been more satisfactory than the average response to the virus, where I think there have been lapses and opening up too soon or not being strict enough at first and that sort of thing.
Okay. All right, thank you. Aside from dealing with the virus now and the risk of a second wave, what are the major threats that you see on the road to the recovery? Recently, I noticed that you raised your voice about the danger of high level of indebtedness of emerging market economies, and you emphasize the importance of a multilateral approach to this problem. Could you elaborate on this?
Well, I think first off that there's a huge difference among the emerging markets and developing countries. Some are much more able to handle their fiscal response because they've got some fiscal space, and others were already facing troubles before all this came along. So it's very different between countries. Some countries right now are okay. India, for example, I think is spending enough. The big problem, in fact, will be if they get the pandemic under control, then they'll have some problems fiscally, but they'll be from over-indebtedness then, not now. So that's an issue. But there's a second issue, too, which I think is equally important, and that is that many of the emerging markets and the developing countries, and especially the less developed countries, do not have their own medical supplies anywhere nearly as much as they need, and they are going to need help that way. And there, I think they're going to need help in kind. I do not think that we can just say, okay, we'll lend you some more money, because they will just be bidding up the price of the scarce supplies, and there's going to have to be something done through the WHO or another mechanism to make sure that the poor countries have some ways of addressing the virus, because as long as it's there in the very poor countries, the rest of us won't be safe anyway.
And let's move on to issues more directly related to finance, international financial system and financial industries. What are the major changes that you expect in the so-called post-COVID era?
I need a crystal ball to answer that, I think. The obvious thing, of course, is that the shift to digital business to business will move a little bit faster. It's quite clear that there's been more success with people working at home than they expected. It's clear they won't stay there now. People will go back to their offices, but I think maybe the shift to digital will be faster than it would otherwise be, which is going to affect all of us in a whole variety of ways. That's certainly number one. The second thing, of course, is that I think there are going to have to be more precautionary reserves and savings on everybody's part, and that may be a macro issue as we go forward. If indeed people have saved more because they know it can happen, or something like it can happen again. So I think that's an issue too. But the third issue is on the other side, which also has implications for finance, and that is if, for example, we were to get a vaccine next, let's say January, and if that vaccine could then give people the confidence they need, we could have a very quick upswing where people who have not been spending as much as they would because they're locked up at home and all that, would all of a sudden try to spend, and we could all of a sudden, with all that macro, get an inflationary burst, in which case interest rates will go up. And so I think the precautionary the stances for, I think, the financial institutions will need to be take a broader look at the risks on both sides, because on the one hand, we might have things go badly and have a very prolonged recession, but on the other hand, there could be quite a quick upturn if we could get a vaccine, or if we get testing methods that are really effective.
By and large, what shape of a recovery do you anticipate? A lot of talks about V-shape, U-shape, W-shape, Nike logo style. What is your thought on this?
Well, I still think it depends on how the health sector goes. It's interesting, we always talk about business confidence. In this case, I think the issue is health confidence. If people are confident that they can get up and around and they can go and do things as they normally did, I think that we might have a very quick recovery once people get that confidence. On the other hand, the longer that we have a period where they start and go, we go into phase 2, as they call it here, then they go back to phase 1, they have to close things down again, and so on. The weaker the recovery will be, and the longer it will take. It's a very hard thing to say which way it will go. Now, what do I hope for? Well, of course, the first thing I hope for is a very rapid discovery of vaccines and very rapid ramping up the production. I mean, the vaccine would, of course, be a vaccine with a long life, that is very safe, and indeed is 99.99% effective. Once we get that, we've got lots going for us. The second thing that we need for that is that countries get a lot better at the contact tracing and all that I get and testing, that I think you and Korea have done very well. People are counting on what Korea did as a model for the rest of the world. Unfortunately, so far, I don't think we've learned our lesson on that. And I'm afraid that we may have to have a second surge to do that. By the way, today was the highest number of cases reported on any single day yet. It's going up, not down, worldwide. So that's an unfortunate thing. Even though in my state it's going down. The east coast of the U.S., northeast coast of the U.S. is better, but the south and the west and the Midwest are doing worse. So there's a different geography there. I think, though, that the more likely prognosis is that we're going to see some people do better than others some one step forward and a half a step back, others 2 steps forward and staying there a while. And so we're going to see a little bit, we're going to see a pickup, I think, from where we were at in March and April. And I think the May numbers are already showing that things picked up a bit, but whether they'll pick up enough to get some momentum on a recovery this quickly, I think is more doubtful. I fear the second surge will bring us back to more trouble.
As you know, international financial community is getting more worried about US-China tension.
As it should.
How would you feel about this? How do you think this tension will evolve down the road?
Well, I hope, of course, that it will evolve by diminishing and getting back to some basis, a better basis of trust and an open system on both sides. I think there's a real problem right now that both sides have lost trust, neither side trusts the other at all, and I worry about it a lot. In fact, I was worrying about it extremely before the pandemic, and at first I thought perhaps the pandemic would remind us that we are all human beings and that perhaps things would go better than they have, but unfortunately that so far has not been the case. I do think that the Chinese did not behave as badly as the American administration has asserted in terms of their behavior with WTO. I think that in the sense the start of the trade war was a mistake, both because I think it was unwarranted and because I think, of course, it's negative, it's doing harm to both sides and no good. So basically, I would hope that we could come to some rapprochement, but at the moment, unfortunately, political leaders in both countries, I think, have been sufficiently, what should I say, put off by what's happened so far, that the hope for getting back to a more amicable basis for our relationship isn't as great as I would like it to be. But certainly, I would hope that over the medium term, once the tension goes away from the pandemic, people could face up to the difficulties that are likely to confront us all if we cannot get the U.S.-China relationship sorted out much better than it is now.
Perhaps one last question before you go to bed. This is a late hour over there. Now, future of Hong Kong. You know, for those who working in the area of international finance, obviously this is an issue. How would you see this future shape of Hong Kong? Is it going to lose the international financial hub status down the road, or how do you see this with this Chinese hardline stance on Hong Kong lately?
Well, I think the stance is clearly unfortunate, and it's quite obvious that the citizens of Hong Kong are not happy with it. So we can start there. Hong Kong, of course, has built up a very good financial services industry and has done very well with it. So in effect, as long as they can, I think people will stay there. But unfortunately, I fear that once the Chinese law has been enacted, I don't know whether it was today or not, but once they come in with their monitoring of things in Hong Kong, that if things go from bad to worse, then of course the various financial institutions will try and move their headquarters, I think. So I think Hong Kong is definitely at risk financially, but first, but that will be because of the political risk, not the other way around.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Anne, for your very insightful views shared with our audience today. Thank you very much one more time. And I look forward to seeing you in person rather than virtually.
I hope so too. And thank you very much and good luck
All right.
to you with the conference.
Okay. All right. Bye now. Thank you.
Bye.